Hello and welcome to Fresh Perspectives. My name is Gail. I hope my hair looks okay. I had to come in stormy winter weather this morning to start the program. But anyways, my guest today is Shauna Anderson, who is now the president and CEO of Hospice of Chautauqua, Hospice and Palliative Care of Chautauqua County. Thank you for coming on the program today, Shauna.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Now, how long have you been president and CEO?
It'll be 2 years in January.
2 years in January, so that was when Ron Sellers retired.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
We worked together for 12 or 13 years prior to that.
Okay. And you have worked as a hospice nurse for 39 years?
Well, actually, that was in our newsletter, and that is not correct.
Oh, they made a mistake?
They did make a mistake. I have been a nurse for 39 years. But I have worked for hospice for 15 of those years.
15.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay, but long enough that you're kind of an expert at working for hospice.
I love the hospice mission and everything about it.
Well, we had hospice the last few weeks before my mother passed away, and I know it was a really great help. You know, all of a sudden, one week it was almost impossible for us to take care of her, and the next week it was totally simplified. It made the biggest difference in the world, and we really appreciated everything that was done for us.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad your experience was good. We can't change, unfortunately, what's happening to people, but we really try very hard to change the experience while people are undergoing these changes, and they're difficult. It's not like when people have babies and they're thrilled to see the healthcare workers. This is at the other end of the life cycle, and it's difficult. So
what caused you to decide to start working for hospice then?
I had been working in home care for quite a few years. I love home care because the people that are in their own homes really have the power to do what they want to do. And so there's no such thing as someone who is, quote, non-compliant. We, as healthcare providers, just haven't figured out what they want and help them achieve that. And I had several friends who worked there that kept calling saying, you need to come to hospice. It's a wonderful kind of nursing, wonderful kind of care. And I finally decided I would make the leap, and I've never looked back. It's been a good experience. Yeah,
when we had hospice for my mother, there was a nurse that came, a registered nurse named Amy Carmen that came.
Yes.
You know her?
I do. She's still with us.
And she was really very nice. I mean, there was like a team that worked together for the patient. There was Amy and Julie Nagel, who was my mother's social worker, and Kathy Smith, who was the chaplain, and before my mother was actually fully on hospice, there was a Dr. Putnam that came to visit my mother once in a while. And
she must have been on palliative care before she was on hospice.
For about almost a year before she died, yeah. And let's see, there was another girl, her name I think is Deanna.
She's a home health aide?
Yeah, she came in 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, every day, and bathed my mother 5 times a week. And that was such a big help to the family to have somebody like her come in and do that. So
the idea is that it allows you to be a daughter rather than a caregiver, get a little respite, a little break, and then you can go out and do grocery shopping or things like that too while they're there. So you get a break in that way too.
At that point in time, I'd been taking care of my mother for 4 years, and it had gotten to where it was really, really hard, you know, because she had gotten so weak and everything. But with them bringing in a hospital bed and various other things that they did, it really simplified things.
Most people don't realize that the hospice benefit, the hospice Medicare benefit that most insurances copy, it requires all of the durable medical equipment like hospital beds, overbed tables, bedside commodes to be paid for by hospice. So that is a big help. If you've been needing a hospital bed prior to hospice, most people have to pay 20%, and that goes away.
And that's expensive.
It's very expensive, sure.
I think maybe $80 to $100 a month or something.
I don't, it's different for each company, but yes.
Well, shall we move along to the pictures that you brought?
Sure.
Okay. We'll do that, and you can tell us all about them.
Okay.
We'll get to look at them, too, because they'll be on the monitor for us.
Oh, this is Connie. She's one of our pet program volunteers with her dog. And we have a pretty robust pet program now. We discovered that one of the large losses for people is their pets. And they worry about what's going to happen to them when they can't take care of them anymore. And so we got a grant through the Banfield Trust about 6 years ago to help us get started. And our pet program has quite a few volunteers now, and they do anything from buying cat food or dog food if the person needs them to do that. They can walk the dogs, they can take animals to the vet. They can bring in, as Connie's doing in this picture, a dog into a home where perhaps they don't have their animals anymore, and they can have a visit. We have cats that visit, dogs that visit, we've had rabbits that visit, and people just love it. So they also take the animals into the nursing home, which always is a lot of fun. Everybody wants to join in.
So, well, I guess we can move on. Now, this is a really beautiful picture.
Isn't that? She is a person that was on service that it was a birthday party, and her family is there, and the staff is there. And she had a tiara on. She was kind of a queen for the day, and they just went all out.
Was her actual nickname Queenie or something?
Yes.
That was it wasn't her real name, it was a nickname?
No, that was her nickname. And but they had flowers and food and gifts, all kinds of things. And
what birthday was it, a 100th maybe?
I don't know. I don't know, but you can see some of the family in there, and in the back row is one of our RN case managers in the black shirt. That's Jackie, a chaplain. Heidi Rayner next to her is a social worker. There's LPNs in there. There is Valerie Wallawender, who's in the purple shirt right next to Queenie, who was our art person. So it takes a full team. We've got art and music in addition to the pet program that aren't traditional pieces of the hospice program, but we feel it's quality of life, and it adds so much, and people love it. Massage therapy, who wouldn't want a massage?
Oh, yeah. I remember there was, well, she only came once, because then my mother passed away, but I had requested a Reiki therapist for my mother, and that was really, really nice.
Yeah, we try to have a wide array of services so people can pick and choose what they want and what has meaning to them. Music is another piece that people often will choose, and all different kinds of music. And sometimes it's them participating in the music, sometimes it's just our music therapist, you know, singing to them, playing her guitar with them to help alleviate pain. So maybe a little less anxiety, a little less, you know, pain medication is needed. So.
Right. Okay, let's see what we have next. Okay, that's the Lawnmower Race,
That
right?
is a lot of fun. They do it every year. You can see that it's up in Mayville, and
At the Lakeside Park? Or is that where it is?
Yeah, you can see the boat right behind the
Right.
Chautauqua Bell. And they've been doing it for maybe 10 years, and hospice has been lucky enough to be the beneficiary of that some of those years. A lot of fun, a lot of people get involved in it.
Now, are those a couple of Jeeps that were in the driveway there?
Oh,
too?
I didn't see.
Oh, there it is, Jeeps. See what I mean? It's over to the one side of the roadway there. It almost looks like a couple of Jeeps to me.
I think they're, what do you call them, UTVs maybe? Is that on the road are you talking about?
Well, there's pink on the hood of the one.
Yeah, I think those are UTVs.
UTVs?
Yeah.
And do they mow lawns too?
No.
But
I think there's more than lawnmowers
they
in the
just
lawnmower run.
participated in the race. Okay.
Yeah. We just want people to participate. This is actually a presentation that we did for the doctor's offices and some of the other healthcare providers when some of the regulations had changed in terms of physicians talking to patients about advanced directives. And so in conjunction with CCHN, we put on this program, it was last February, I believe. And there were 80 some people at it. So we try to get the word out and educate too and make it as easy as we can for the other healthcare providers in the county.
Yeah.
Oh, We Honor Veterans is a national program that hospices do. This is actually a pinning, and we have volunteers that help us with this. This woman was a veteran, and she was eligible for some pins and certainly eligible for recognition as a veteran. So our volunteers and some of our staff and sometimes some of the local officials will coordinate that, and we'll take those pins and that recognition out to them. Families usually there, and they're thrilled to have their story told. A lot of times families will say, we had no idea Mom or Dad did something really notable. So
I assume she wasn't a combat veteran. Was she a nurse or something in the service?
I don't know
You
in
don't
this
really
particular
even know.
case. No, we've done quite a few of them. So, this is Baggett Laredo Baggett. That's Sham Baggett up in the front with the gray and white coat on. And they do a chicken barbecue. And these are some of the external events, like the lawnmower run. We don't set them up, we don't run them, but other people do for us.
Oh, I see.
Which is a huge help. Hospice's roots are in volunteer hospices, and so our regulations require us to do, for example, 5% of our care has to be done by volunteers. And so our reimbursement is also designed that we have to do fundraising.
Oh, okay.
And particularly for massage and music and art and the pet program, those aren't reimbursed at all.
Oh.
Community bereavement isn't reimbursed.
Oh.
So we do the fundraising so that we can have those services
Oh, I
available
see.
for people.
I see.
So it's a wonderful community. People are very supportive of hospice and palliative care.
The volunteers don't actually get paid then, or?
Our volunteers?
Uh-huh.
No. And we
No.
have quite a few volunteers. We run between maybe 45 and 55.
Wow.
And some do patient visits. Some do pet visits related, to a patient's home, but related to the pets. We have 8 that do a death vigil. If someone, a lot of the folks we take care of, their family doesn't live here anymore, and they don't want Mom or Dad or whomever to be alone, we have volunteers that will come and sit with them the last few hours so that no one's left alone if that's their choice.
Okay.
We have volunteers that do events, so they do a wide array of things. We could never function without our volunteers. We really, really appreciate them and everything they do. Gardening, cooking, reading mail, reading books. Yeah. Very rewarding for them as well.
Good.
Our events person is in the dark dress with the blonde hair, BJ Boniuto. And she,
On the left?
yes.
Okay.
And she brought to us Designer Bag Bingo, which is a fundraiser that's actually done throughout the country, but she gets real designer bags all year. And then twice a year, they actually do designer bag bingo, where you have to get bingo and you win the purses. And it's very well attended, needless to say. They have a lot of fun. So this is just them gathering some of the bags and the wallets.
Okay, so the company donates the designer bags, the manufacturers or somebody?
Some of them are donated, some of them are given a special cost, and some of it she gets sales, bags on sales, and then pays for some of them too. So it's kind of a mixed bag, if you will. Bad pun.
It's too bad they're not all of 100% donated. That would be a big help,
nice.
Wouldn't it?
They would be nice, but people really enjoy it, and they're well attended. So it's a lot of fun. It's kind of wild. If you like bingo, you can imagine what it's like.
Okay. Yeah.
We have started selling our bouquets again in the spring, and we have a number of florists and other sites around the county that help take orders and then help disperse the bouquets when they come in. We had stopped doing that for a while. It's a lot of work, a lot of logistical organization, but that's a picture of one of the sites and some of our staff working on the bouquets, which is nice in the spring for different occasions. The Shred Center, for Earth Day, they do a special external event for us where they'll take the shredding and the proceeds. They do it for free, but people can leave a donation, and then the proceeds of that come to hospice. And they've been doing that for several years. In fact, when they changed hands, the new owners were gracious enough to continue it. So,
oh, good.
Yeah, that's important.
And this is a hockey game.
Bubble hockey.
Bubble hockey.
This was one of BJ's ideas, and this is at the Jamestown Ice Arena. And our first event, we also rent them out, but this was our first event, and it was so much fun. But speaking as someone who was in one of the bubbles, it's a little rough.
I can imagine. You know, it looks like the one guy in one of the reddish colored ones, it looks like he's getting ready to fall over backwards.
There was a lot of falling over backwards, forwards, sideways. And there were some high school boys that were in some of the bubbles too, who were a lot more strong and quick than some of the others that were in there. So it was a lot of fun. But that was one of the events that we did.
Sounds a little bit dangerous.
Well, I think I told you it took 3 days before I could walk upright again, so it was a little tough. This is our new office space in Fredonia we moved to in the past year, and that's our staff that primarily works in Fredonia, Dunkirk, Silver Creek, Westfield, Cassadaga. Dr. Putnam is standing under the word care with gray pants and blue pants. He works full-time for us, both on the palliative side and on the hospice side. He does make visits to all the palliative care patients, and you had mentioned earlier that he came out to see your mother.
Right. You still have the one in Lakewood, right?
Yes, that's our main, that's actually our only office in the eyes of the Department of Health.
Oh.
Our Fredonia office doesn't have charts or any of the typical
is that
things,
right?
but it's a table where they can sit and work. A fax, a phone, restrooms are available. Because from Silver Creek to Lakewood, that's a long drive. We don't want them to have to do that every day.
I see. Yeah.
Mel Perks Motorcycle Run is an external event also, and a lot of fun. They've had hundreds of bikes participate, and then they have music, and they have auctions, live auctions, Chinese auctions, and it's just a lot of fun. They start early in the morning, and they're usually done early afternoon. And this was a beautiful day. We haven't always had great weather for it, but we've always had a lot of fun with it. And they've been very good. They've been doing it, I'm trying to remember, maybe 5 years?
Oh, 5 years?
Yeah, yeah.
Now, what do they do with the motorcycles? Do they race them, or?
No, they, there's a map that you have to follow, and you take your cards with you, and you roll dice, and then there's points that are collected, and then you come back, and there's winners of prizes and so forth, and then there's a meal, and then all the auction and music and dancing and those things.
I see.
So.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Explain to our viewing audience what the difference between hospice and palliative care are.
Oh, the million-dollar question. Hospice care is, a lot of people refer to it as comfort care. It's palliation or control of symptoms. And if we have a disease like cancer, those symptoms are likely to be pain, maybe nausea, those kinds of things. And it's controlling those so that life is going to be the best every day that it can possibly be. The confusing part is that that's palliative care. Hospice is palliative care, 100%. Palliative care is just control of those symptoms, and it can start at the time of diagnosis. Your doctor tells you you've got cancer and it's not curable. Your palliative care can start right then, and it's controlling symptoms. But the last 6 months of that disease and of your life is hospice care. It's far more intense. All of the symptoms that have shown up along the way, things start lining up those last 6 months, and it tends to be a lot more intense. You need a lot more support. You took care of your mother for 4 years. Didn't it get more and more and more care as you went along?
It got more and more difficult, yes.
And that's the idea of hospice being that last 6 months of palliative care. What we found was about 6 years ago, we were getting referrals from people for hospice, and they would come on to service and they were desperate. And they would say things like, I've been in pain, horrible pain, for 2 years. And we'd say, why? They'd say things like, I'm 85, I thought that's the way it had to be. Or, I have a cancer diagnosis, I expected it, I thought that's the way it'd have to be. So a lot of times they didn't even tell their doctors how horrible that is for them. And they would come on, and they would be on for 2 days, and they'd be gone.
Oh,
and we
wow.
said, this can't continue. So we started a palliative program with the idea that if it's not hospice, which is a pretty scary word, that if we're going to help you be comfortable, if we're going to help control your symptoms, people will come earlier. And that's what happened. The palliative program were people that weren't in the last few days. And now we have people that are in the last, year or so of their life, and their symptoms, they just need a little help with it, or they need networking to help pull all the resources together in the community. So hospice is that very definite reimbursed, Medicare, Medicaid, Blue Cross, they all reimburse that. Palliative care program is before hospice because you don't want hospice. Some people will be on chemo until the last breath they take, or because you're not deemed to be in that last 6 months. And it's not a sad thing. There's a lot of humor and banter and playfulness in hospice and palliative care, but it's making every day the best that it can be, making sure you have the resources that you need and the symptoms managed. Is that? It's confusing.
Yeah.
If you had symptoms like pain because you had cancer, but your doctor said you're going to live another 5 years. You could have palliative care, but you couldn't have hospice.
Oh,
Does that clarify a little bit?
probably, yeah.
Okay. It is confusing, though. We even struggle with which it should be, but we don't want people having to wait. You shouldn't be in pain. You shouldn't have symptoms when they can be managed.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Did we have more pictures to go through here? Yes.
This is this is one of our new events. Again, thanks to BJ, who's sitting in the chair on the left. We wanted to get children talking about hospice and palliative care, just because people are so intimidated by the terminology. So BJ put out to 2 of the schools. We wanted to kind of pilot it, and we did a contest, and they knew it was for hospice and palliative care, and it was an art contest. And then we had people come in to the office and vote, and we had prizes for the winners, but we got amazing pictures from these students in Chautauqua County. And then in the fall, we had an auction. And part of what we auctioned off were these pictures that the students had done that we had put in frames. And so we had kids at a hospice event, which is pretty rare, and they were thrilled. They were all watching to see how how much their pictures were going for, and we had a lot of fun. We had other items in the auction too, and Chinese auction and so forth, but we had, I don't know, 150, 200 people at the event, and we now have kids coming in the office, and we're hoping to have kids that will volunteer and just get people talking about it. It's part of life.
Right, it is.
People don't want to talk about it. It's not a happy topic, but it's a necessary topic.
Now, about this picture here, is Bob Terry buried in the picture? I thought I recognized him.
Yeah, absolutely. This is some of our volunteers at the last volunteer appreciation dinner, and Mary Jo Bradish is kind of in the center with a black and white top and glasses and dark hair to her shoulders. That's our volunteer coordinator.
Okay.
And she does a great job keeping everyone up to date on what's going on and at the right house at the right time. And she does all our orientation for volunteers. It's a good group. We try and recognize them every year.
Yeah, that's a good idea. They like to know that they're appreciated.
And they are. They absolutely are. This is just a picture of a group that had done quilts.
It looks like the YWCA in Westfield.
I believe it is.
That's where we have our vegetarian society.
Oh, okay.
dinners, yeah.
And different groups have made quilts and knitted and crocheted lap robes for patients so that they have them and the staff takes them out with them as they go out and visit. And it's like prayer shawls. Also, we get those from time to time just to let people know that the community is thinking of them and that they're not alone.
Yeah.
Ah.
Is that you standing at the podium?
Yes, it is. And that's Tom Reed behind me, more importantly. And we have tried to do a little bit of legislative work, and there were 2 bills that were very important for hospice this year. And we invited Congressman Reed in, and you'll see some other people that you probably recognize in that picture. And we came out and we talked, and actually we had 3 families that did a video for Congressman Reed telling them about the benefits of palliative care and hospice, and then we actually had a family and patient that came in and spoke directly with him. And he did end up co-signing on both bills, which will make a huge difference. So just some of the other things that we're involved in. Hoops for Hospice High School does it every year and donates the proceed, and you can see by all the smiles they have a lot of fun doing it. So just another external event, which we appreciate. It makes all the difference. That's how we're able to do what we do. They that's another external event, and they do a large golf tournament every year. And they have given us the proceeds. We have taken care of family members and for a number of them.
The shirts they were wearing was a really pretty color too.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Nice group. Very nice group.
Were there any more pictures then? Probably not.
I think that's
That
probably
was
it.
that was
Okay.
it. Yeah, that was it. Now you have a couple of things on the table that you wanted to show the viewing
I
audience.
do.
One of them is the light from the Light of Life
We
services.
we have a large bereavement program. Anyone that is on hospice services is eligible for bereavement, and their families for 13 months. And certainly we can go beyond the 13 months, but that gets people through the first Christmas, the first birthday, the first anniversary, whatever. That's very difficult. But we also have two events. The Light of Life we have towards the holidays, because that's a difficult time.
Right.
And we do that in coordination with the ornament sales, so lots of times people will purchase an ornament in their loved one's memory and hang it on their tree.
That is really a beautiful
Isn't it beautiful?
ornament.
And
Yes,
they're
it
different
is.
every year. We also, in front of our Lakewood office, there are 4 large columns if you drive by.
Right.
And those have the names, as does the program, of everyone who has passed away or everyone that they want to remember at that time. So we'll have people come in the evening or even during office hours, and they just come and they sit. And they touch the name of the loved one, and it's just a very concrete way of remembering them. In the spring, we also have a butterfly release, and that's why I brought the butterfly. It's symbolic, and people will come, and we have a service at that time also, and then they each get butterflies that they release up into the world. Remembering their loved one that way too. And so those are the 2 main events for bereavement that we do. But I also wanted to remind people that even if you haven't been on hospice, we lose people. And it can be very difficult, and you're welcome to pick up the phone and call and say, I need some help. We have barbecues where the bereaved get together. We have different support groups. We have a support group strictly of parents that have lost children. We have...
Yeah, I've always thought that would be the worst thing a person could have to go through,
can't
is to
imagine.
lose a child or a grandchild.
Yeah, that's probably one of the toughest. We're also working with several other organizations in the county right now to put together a support group for those that have lost family members to the opioid epidemic, because that takes some very specific skills. So we're working with mental health groups and the drug abuse groups and so forth. But we need as a community to come together and support people. And so I wanted to share that and make sure that people knew that you don't have to have services in order to tap into it. And if you have an idea of other ways that help you cope with loss, let us know. We're always trying new things. We do counseling as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Now you have these booklets that you give the patient and their family when they go on hospice, and this is really helpful to understand what's going on. It really explained a lot to to me like end-of-life developmental milestones and tasks. If you want to say a little bit about some of these topics, you know. Sense of completion with worldly affairs, sense of completion in relationships with community, sense of meaning about one's individual life, experiencing love of self, experiencing love of others, sense of completion in relationships with family and friends, acceptance of the finality of life, of one's existence as an individual, sense of a new self beyond personal loss, sense of meaning about life in general, surrendering to the transcendent unknown, letting go. People, do you think that people tend to be more accepting when they know that they're at the end? I know my mother, in her last year, was actually looking forward to passing away because she had been suffering for such a long time. She just wanted it to be over with, you know. So,
and that's where the symptom management comes in, because sometimes if your symptoms are managed, then it's not so bad being around and you enjoy being with family and so forth. Very clearly, people start turning inward, and part of the work, because there is a lot of work involved in end of life and the dying process, is doing a life review. Was I a good parent? Was I a good child? Was I a good spouse? All of these things. And getting a sense of meaning and worth from your life on earth, knowing that that's going to end. It can be a very positive time. I lost a friend when she was in her 40s to cancer, and she said, I've never been closer to my husband or to my children than at the end of my life. We talk about things and what's important, and things that we didn't take the time to talk about beforehand. So I think it's an opportunity also for people to reconcile. Lots of people come to us on service and they haven't talked to a son or a daughter or a brother or a sister for 20 years.
oh, wow.
And part of why we're a complete team is to maybe help reconcile and say, well, do you want to have that conversation before you go, because then it's too late.
Right, right.
And there's lots of people who do reconcile in the last few months or weeks of their life. And that's helpful to the family and helpful to the person to let go.
Now, another thing is withdrawal here. It's like apparently the person's hearing remains intact till the very end, and they say not to say anything when you're around the patient that you wouldn't said had they been fully conscious or whatever. So to let them to identify yourself when you're around them, if you're going to do something, you know, to help them or whatever. Tell a person what you're going to, call them by name and tell them what you're going to do and so forth.
At the very end stages, the last few weeks oftentimes, our hearing, it said, it actually becomes more acute.
Does it really?
So
wow.
It's been interesting over the years. You'll have someone who
maybe has been hard of hearing?
Yes, and then you think, oh, well, we can say it, but you can't.
No.
And it can be hurtful. So
right.
we know that people hear right up until they take their last breath. So talk to them and tell them. And it's amazing the experiences that we've had, even folks with dementia, advanced dementia. Talk to them, because you just don't know what's getting through. Our vision becomes more blurry and more shadowy at the very end. So, or they may not be responding. So if their eyes are closed, if your eyes are closed and someone comes in and touches you or turns you over or something and you don't know what's coming, it's scary. So you always identify yourself and tell them what you're going to do. You always do it slowly. Now we're going to do this, now we're going to do that.
Probably one thing a lot of people don't think about is the changes in appetite and elimination. Now, I guess we're talking about people in the last days when organs are starting to shut down and so forth. You don't want to force feed them liquids or foods or anything if they can't digest them anymore. And sometimes it gets to where you just put a little water in their mouth with a syringe or swab it with certain types of wipes or sponges that are specially made for the process. It's my understanding that if you force people to drink a lot, you can't really force them at the end to drink a lot of water because you think it'll be good for them, but because it actually increases discomfort and so forth. So why don't you say a little bit about what you know about this?
I'm glad you brought it up because it's always a very difficult conversation.
Yeah.
We live in a culture where if you love someone, you
feed them.
You feed them, and you have fellowship, and you drink with them. You know, here's a cup of coffee or whatever. But at the end of life, you're absolutely right. Our bodies are designed to shut down, and one system helps the next system. And if we fight that and we try to force feed or force fluids on someone, unfortunately, I've seen the results. And one example is a woman that was probably in her last 48 hours, and the family, and understandably, because we're not ready to let go and we don't want someone to starve to death. That's what we think it is. But you don't starve to death at the end of your life. Your body's shutting down, you can't use it. And this particular family said, you've got to feed her, you've got to, give her IV fluids. And we started them, but we stayed pretty close, and within an hour they said, oh my goodness, the fluid builds up around, so we can't breathe, it goes in our fingers, it goes in our face, and they said shut it off and stop. And we shut it off, and she was comfortable, and she passed away peacefully. It's not a good thing to force anybody. We know, if you say, I'm not hungry, you know what your body needs.
Yeah, well, we know if we come down with the stomach flu or something.
That's a whole different ballgame.
Well, you can't eat then either,
Yeah, but you will after you're over the flu.
Right. And like the people's urine gets thicker and darker the closer.
Tea colored, and then sometimes for the last 24 hours, you won't urinate at all. And that's not uncommon.
Okay. And there's changes in breathing and changes in body temperature. And one thing I remember that we had to get for my mother was because she was getting agitated. For one thing, I think it was probably at least 4 to 5 weeks before she passed away. She had been starting to talk to deceased relatives and so forth. And I remember the very last time that we had her at the emergency room, which was just a couple of days before hospice came on board with us. We had her at the emergency room, and she kept saying something about, I want to go home. And we thought she was nagging to go back to her apartment. But then when I got my hands on the hospice information here, I'm reading that that's common during the last few weeks to say things like, I want to go home. Would you, and you know, she was talking with a brother of hers who'd been deceased for like about 40 years, and my father who'd been gone for almost 30 years, and so forth. And would you talk about some of your experiences with this?
One of the reasons why we want people to feel more comfortable about talking about death and dying is because if we are comfortable, we can truly be there at the bedside of our loved ones when they pass, and we can really hear what they're saying. And oftentimes, we find that people will talk metaphorically. I can remember a gentleman who was a carpenter and it was early when I started working in hospice, and he said, I have 3 more cupboards to make. And I didn't catch on at first. And then the next time I saw him, he said, I have 2 more cupboards to make. And I thought, he's telling me something. And then the next time I saw him, he had 1 more cupboard to make. And we knew that we were close. And I think that taught me to really listen. When they say home, are they talking about their worldly home? Are they talking about another home? And so we need to listen to what people say. And the things that people will share, if you're open to hearing what they have to say, is amazing. And the experience at the end with people it is just pretty amazing. I don't know if you share some things with people, if they, in general they'd probably think we were kind of crazy, but it's people that tell us they see angels in the room and different things. It's comforting to them.
You know, about maybe 2.5 weeks before my mother passed away, she started getting really agitated. She was in a hospital bed in the living room, so she couldn't see her bedroom furniture, and basically I was getting accused of having gotten rid of her bedroom furniture, and we tried to explain things to her, and it didn't, she wouldn't believe us and stuff like that. And so when I mentioned it to Amy at her next visit, then they got a drug for her that controlled that agitation. It's called Haldol, and you can just squirt it with a syringe that doesn't have a needle in it into the side of their mouth. And it calms them down. And the agitation was really difficult to deal with until we got that medication for her. So that's something about the medications and things that you said that were helpful. But there were a lot of other things going on with her. Like, for some reason, she thought she had a baby. Almost like she thought she'd given birth or something like that. She kept talking about this baby, always wanting us to check on the baby and make sure, is the baby breathing? And almost like questions that somebody might ask, you know, right after having had a baby or something, you know. And
don't know where the baby would come from,
you know, but she kept there kept being questions about the baby, you know. And
as you do out that life review and that closing out and turning inward, I don't know. Sometimes you wonder if it's a chemical imbalance as we go through this process that causes us to imagine things. Sometimes I wonder if there isn't something in our history that we're kind of closing out, you know, maybe the loss of a baby or something like that. And I don't know if we'd ever know. Well, I know that as far as babies go, I know that there was my mother was the oldest sibling, but before she was born, there had been a sister that had passed away. I don't know if that maybe had anything to do with it. Also, in past years, I had
I had had a miscarriage one time, and my sister had had 2 miscarriages at previous times, you know, and
So
I
you
don't know if she
what-
thought that
Yeah.
it was one of those babies. One time I even asked her what the baby's name was, and she said, "I'm calling him George." She had, an uncle of hers had committed suicide at one point in time in his life. He'd committed suicide, and his name was George, the particular uncle of hers. So I don't know if it
You
had
don't know
to
how
do
it
with
was,
any
yeah.
of those.
No way to know.
But
You try not to use the medications. Two things I was going to say about the medications, the liquid, because part of what happens at the end of our life is we lose the ability to swallow. So lots of times things will go to a liquid that you can get into someone without having to give them shots, because nobody likes shots, nobody likes
No.
needles, so you want to
No.
do it without that if you can. But the Haldol in particular, when there are hallucinations or there are things that people see and it's comforting, like the angels that are up in the corner of the
well,
room.
when it was things that didn't make her feel agitated, we just went along with it.
Absolutely.
But when it was when she got
Scary,
agitated and started arguing with us and like that was when we would give her the Haldol.
And that's exactly
you know
the
so-
philosophy. The least amount of anything that you can do is the best.
Right.
And we try to keep the medications at a minimum, but you know, everybody's different. Everybody's path is different, you know, both in their lives and at the end of their lives. So it sounds like you gave her wonderful care. And
Well, we tried anyway. We did the best we could according to our ability, you know. So
it takes
let's
a
see.
lot to take care of someone.
It does.
And sometimes you don't get a lot of sleep at night because they're awake at night, and day after day it can be a lot of
right.
physical work and emotional strain, and people need to know what they're getting into, but it's so rewarding to be there at that time of life with someone.
I remember friends telling me, we know that it's hard, it seems really hard now, but after it's all over with, you're going to be glad that you did it. You know, you're going to be glad that you kept her out of the nursing home. So,
Yeah. And you've got a lot of fond memories because you talked about things. There's something so intimate in giving someone a bath, for example, that everything is talked about, you know, because there's a closeness there that there isn't in a lot of relationships in the world, and things that people share with you that you don't expect at those moments. It's worth it. The sleepless nights and everything, it's all very worthwhile.
Well, after it's all over and done with, then you can get your rest. One thing that I've always noticed, when a loved one of mine passes away, the first night, I don't sleep all night. I know the undertaker, I said this last time, you know, which was with my mother, I was mentioning it to him, and I said, what is that anyway? Is that adrenaline or something that keeps us awake? And he goes, well, I'm not sure. I know it's kind of a shock. I know there was another nurse from hospice named Debbie that came in and spent some time with us, too. I can't think what her married name is. Her maiden name was Hanson.
I don't know. We've had a few Debbies.
A few Debbies.
I don't know which that would be.
She was coming in. I remember her telling me about a week and a half before my mother died. I remember her telling me something about it doesn't matter how well prepared you think you are. When the time comes that she passes, you're going to be a mess. That's what she said. And it always never fails that when somebody that I'm really close to passes away, that I just don't sleep a wink the entire night, the entire first night after they pass. Seems like they usually pass late in the evening, too.
They often do.
I don't know why that is. I apologized to the undertaker when he came to get I said, every time I have to call you,
Most people...
for one of my relatives, because one of my relatives has passed, it seems like it's late at night. I have to get you up. And he goes, oh, well, you know.
There are times during the day when more people pass away, and that's when it is. Yes. Yes.
So I was a little bit disappointed at first. I thought, oh no, why couldn't it wait till morning? You know what I mean? But then afterwards, the next day, I got to thinking about it, and I thought, well, maybe it was better this way, because the other people in the apartment complex were all in bed asleep for the night. So she had privacy when she was being removed from her apartment, you know. If it had been daytime, they'd have been all out there looking.
Mm-hmm. Well, and people don't change. If you're a very private person in life, then you tend to be a private person in death. And again, lessons learned. I took care of a gentleman who was very precise and in his work and in his life. That was his personality. And he had called and said, you know, would I come make a visit? And I did, and he wanted certain things done, and then he wanted his family to go in the other room.
Right.
And he wanted to spare them the last moment.
Oh, that happens a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of people do that they don't want anybody in the room when they leave.
And that's what he wanted, and the family honored it. But I think of all the people that I've talked to over the years, and they will say, I was there 24 hours a day. I went to go get a cup of coffee for 5 minutes, and that's when they passed away. And they have all this guilt on their shoulders, and but that's why they passed away then, because they were waiting to be alone to spare you that moment. They're a private person, and that's what they want. So in hospice, we'll say, we're all leaving.
Chris, I want to run over a couple of minutes here. We're down to 5 seconds. And I don't really want to end it quite yet. My mother, I remember the breathing was the last day of her life was very loud and relaxed sounding, but very, very loud. And I remember that night I was going to be staying overnight with her, and at around about 10:15, I decided to, I better get some sleep. I better try to get some sleep. And I went and laid down, and around about 11 o'clock, I didn't hear her breathing anymore. At first I thought the breathing had just sort of quieted down, but then, but then after another minute or so, her cat started bouncing off the walls and acting really bizarre. So I got up and went to check on her, and I grabbed a hold of my mother and just gently shook her a little bit and said, "Mom, are you awake?" And I didn't get any response, of course. So I took her arm, which was completely limp by then. I took a hold of her arm and felt for a pulse in the wrist, and there was no pulse. And then the last thing I did was I put my hand over her nose and mouth to see if I could feel any air passing, which there wasn't. So then I knew for sure that she was gone, and I called my husband to let him know Mom had passed. I said, I don't know. I said, I'm going to probably stay here overnight. I don't know when I'll be home tomorrow, because we would have to go to the funeral home then. And then I called my brother. He had been there earlier in the evening, and he'd gone home. And I called my brother, and he I said, this was weird. I said, it's funny the things that you think at that time. I said, should we call hospice now or should we wait till morning? And he goes, oh, you better call them now. He goes, I'll be right over. So I called her hospice. This was actually on Memorial Day that year. And so basically most people were on the holiday off. And I got a nurse that was on call or whatever, however it's set up. And so she took care of calling the undertaker for me. When you have hospice, you don't have to do it yourself, which is
you need somebody.
It's a big help, you know. It's more complicated if somebody dies in your house unexpectedly. Then you have to have the ambulance come first and the police and all of that first. And then, so anyway, then what happened was then the undertaker called the coroner, and the nurse came up to be with me and my brother, and then the hospice nurse, and then a while later, the undertaker and the coroner came through the door. Pretty much they'd arrived right at the same time. It almost looked like they'd ridden together or something, you know. And the coroner had to examine my mother and everything. And so we, I just wanted to tell this story, you know, as part of the program. And so basically it was, well, as a result of not sleeping that night, I never did go to sleep then after that. They came and got her. But then after I got through at the funeral home in the morning and all these other things I had to do, I went home, and as soon as I'd had supper, I had to go to bed because by that time I was too tired to not to stay up, you know, after 2 days and a night, you know. So, well, anyway, I just want to thank you. This has been very meaningful that you came on the program today, and I'm sure it'll mean a lot to other people too, and they'll have some idea when the time comes for a family member of their own what it's going to be like. And so I really appreciate your having come on.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing your story. That's not always
easy. Yeah. I wanted to just so that people would know that I understand what they're going through, you know.
It's difficult.
When the time comes. So we've come to the end of another episode of Fresh Perspectives, and I'll see the rest of you in a couple of weeks.